Hi guys, welcome to another Facehammer video about Warhammer the Old World. In this video, I'm going to be talking about universal special rules from the core book. I'm going to go through every single one. I'm going to explain kind of what they do, if I think they're rules you need to look out for when you're looking at your unit profiles. And there's sometimes some weird combos and interactions that, you know, make for interesting reading. Again, before I get into it, I just want to say thank you very much for the support. It's been pretty overwhelming. And over 400 new subscribers since the weekend. That's really, really good for the channel. So I really appreciate that. And if you're not subscribed and you're enjoying what I'm doing, please hit the button. It helps me out, helps other people find the channel and all that stuff. One more shameless plug. So I've got my Arcosites from Matt at Pro Painted. So as you can see, they're pretty decent quality. That's the one that I've got on the advert, which is the blue one, but he does other colours as well. So I got these, so I'll be using these when I do my demo videos with some top-down footage just to show how they work and how you can utilize them. But essentially, you put that edge against the unit, and that's your 45 degrees. So when you go there, you put that against in the corner. That's your angle, and if you got a laser, you can extend it out, and you can see whether you're front, side, whatever. So very useful tool. So if you want one, you want to help me, links in the description. It'll be at the end as a QR code, and you get 10% off anything from Pro Painted. And Matt's stuff's really good. You know, if you want dice trays or tokens or Age of Sigmar stuff or 40k stuff, you just loads of stuff like that. So yeah, there you go. So that's that bit done. So and let's get into the show, and let's talk about universal special rules. So I'm going to be doing my kind of usual with this. Sorry if the quality is not amazing. I know some people have mentioned that but on the other videos, but I'll try and make it as clear as I possibly can. Again, the idea is just as a guide, not to give you a way of having the rule book. So we've got universal special rules. So they're in alphabetical order. I'm going to go for every single one, and I'm going to talk about what they do and if they're a good one or a bad one. You know, generally most of them are good. They're a benefit. There are some negative ones as well, and you'll see we get into there. So we have ambushes, which is a special rule that allows you to be held in reserve rather than deployed at the start of the game. So basically you roll a d6 on a 4+, you can come on, but you come on, and the important here is the compulsory moves subphase. Now this is after charges. So it's you can remaining move though. So you put them on and then you can move, but you can't charge. There's quite an important distinction. You can't be within 8 of an enemy model. If you're still in reserve by round 5 because you've been that unlucky, and I've seen it happen, then yes, you just come on automatically. There are some rules that interact with this. So for example, the Tomb Kings, I'm going to call it came from below because that's the old word, but that's not the right wording. I can't remember, but they're like ambush special rule. It came from beneath the sands or whatever it is. So that rule, interacts with this one because a Lich Priest can bring a unit on with a leadership test, and the ranges are different. You've got to be within 12 or in your command range, I think, something like that. So there are, just because this is the ambush rule, doesn't mean there aren't variants of the ambush rule. And I know like the Beastmen have got a Brayhorn that gives them a reroll or a plus or something like that. So I'm not going to go through those because they're very faction specific. And when I talk about those factions, which I will get to, I will talk about those. So the idea, just from a content map, is I've got these advanced rules, which are kind of like the stuff I need to put in my head. So when I record the other shows, I can recall what they are and go, oh, it's this, and I can refer people to this video if they want to see it and see it all for themselves. Anyway, so pretty cool. It's, you know, a way to come on, but it's a bit unreliable. It's 50-50, you know, is what it is. There's something quaint about that. In Age of Sigmar, you just go, yeah, I'm coming on. Then you've got Armor Bane. So this one is basically when you roll a 6 to wound, then the armor penetration characteristic of the weapon is improved by 1, and if it doesn't have 1, it gets -1. Now, some people have said they've noticed profiles with Killing Blow and Armor Bane both trigger on a 6 to wound, and they're sort of thinking, wow, why have you got that? And the reason is Killing Blow doesn't apply to everything. So Armor Bane would apply to monsters, but you can't Killing Blow a monster, but there is a rule for that, which is why Tomb Scorpions are amazing. Then we've got Armored Hide, and again, there's been many questions about mounts, characters on mounts, and I get that. It took me a while to get my head around it, even with the rulebook. So Armored Hide basically proves the armor save of the rider as well as the creature itself. Generally, you're never going to be rolling a save for the creature because there's none of this hit the mount, hit the rider, mount gets killed, rider drops to the floor. Like in older versions of Warhammer, they're a combined thing. So generally, it's got one armor save. It's essentially like barding for a monster. It is the best way to think about it. If you've got a mount as a character, which is, I'll do a separate show on characters, but if you're mounted as a character and the mount has a save and the character has a save, you don't add those together, you take the best one. So for example, if you've got a Tomb King and you've got a Chariot, which is the better save, that's what you use. However, you do combine wounds. So if you're on a Chariot, you'll have like 7 wounds with a Tomb King, which I think is awesome. But anyway, that's a separate thing. So just important to note. Then we got breath weapons. Now I did mention before about the they're not once per round, which I think's awesome. You can't do them in as a standard shoot or in combat, but this kind of allows you to put support characters on these mounts, which weren't very good in the previous game because you're like, why did you put a monster? You're paying for that combat profile, but you're never really fighting, and they just hit the rider and kill your mage. Now, because it's a combined profile and it enhances the mage survivability, plus the fact you can use breath weapons every turn, which, you know, it makes that kind of wizard flying around using breath weapons viable, I think, as an option in a list. So even like the Lich on the Bone Dragon becomes a kind of, oh, maybe I will put my Hierophant on the Bone Dragon because he no longer can be one shot. It gives him other benefits. So I think it's one of those great options which might be taken up by players. But anyway, the breath weapon, you put the template down in the front arc of the base and wholly within the 90 degree. And if you want to know that, then you've got these. I'll stop doing that now, I promise. Sorry. So yeah, within the 90 degree of the unit, you can put the flame template down. It works like any other template. So any model wholly covered is hit. Anything partially covered on a 4+. And then you roll to wound, basically. That's it. Now, one of the things I did see someone say about they think templates are an outdated thing. I kind of disagree that with this. Yeah, it's the old world, right? We're bringing the old world back, and it's always had templates from when I remember. Even when there was the massive one, the flame template that the Warpfire Thrower used to use. I think that was 4th edition. It was like green on one side. It was massive. There's nothing better, really, for me, than when you're physically putting that template over models, looking down and seeing how many are getting affected by that breath weapon. There's something really connecting with the game with that for me. I think it's the imagery and that really sticks in my mind. And maybe that's because I was doing it when I was 11 and I was a kid, and that's the kind of thing that you think back to. But yeah, the templates are here. Just be happy they're here. I mean, I know they're not as effective. Bases have got bigger, blah, blah, blah. They're cool. We like breath weapons. They're cool. You can do it every turn. It's fine. I like it. Yeah, I'm certainly going to try out a Dragon Mage. I think they're super good. Chariot Run is probably one of my favorite new special rules, because from a tactical point of view, this opens up so much in the game, and to factions that traditionally didn't have a lot of this bait and switch flee mechanic. So Chariot Runners is a great rule. I'm really interested. There might be some weird stuff with this that needs FAQ in, but I think it's cool. So any friendly models that have the type Chariot can draw line of sight over or through models with this special rule. They can even move through units of Chariot Runners that are in a skirmish formation. Now, movement. You can charge through them. Reading this, you can charge through them. So you can have a screen of light, skeleton, cavalry if you're playing Tomb Kings in a skirmish formation, and you can charge your chariots through that unit, but your enemy cannot charge through that unit. That's crazy good from a tactical point of view. There's so much you can do there. I'm really excited to try that out in games. I will once I've played some games, I'll do a detail on this to show you what I mean. Once I've played around with it, we might see an FAQ. Who knows, they might change that so you can't charge through, but we'll see. If you can, I think that's super amazing, because it gives Tomb Kings an option to get that charge with the chariots, and that's super important for chariots to get the charge. And it says here that you could also treat friendly chariots that are within 1 inch of one or more of the model as part of the unit for its coherency. So that kind of means you can split your unit up with the chariots in the middle, or the chariot in the middle, so you can almost protect the chariot from being charged in the flanks. That's cool. I mean, there's a lot here. That Beastmen would love this rule, you know, and even Chaos Chariots, you know, used in units Forsaken. You can do some cool stuff. I'm really excited about that. Yeah, that's awesome. So then we've got close order. We've talked about this, and it's kind of like your standard formation, and there's lots of rules that go with it. One rule that I missed, and sorry, I haven't got the name to hand, but thank you very much for pointing it out in the comments, is that you also get a +1 static res just for being in close order. And what this is really cool is that I saw the maximums as +2 for infantry, and I was thinking it used to be +3. That's quite a big change. And also heavy infantry only need 4 for a fighting rank. So now this means if you had a unit of like 12, and I'm going to use Chaos Warriors as an example, 12 Chaos Warriors, you've got 3 ranks of 4, so you've got +2 combat res. As I said, you take a casualty, you won't, but there you go, you've got +2. You're in close order, so you get another +1 automatically. So that's quite good. Now, people are probably thinking, what about my skeletons? What about my Skaven? Well, that's another conversation, but what about my horde units? There is a horde rule. It's not quite the same, and it allows you to increase the maximum rank bonus by 1. So a unit of skeletons, 3 deep, in close order, would actually have +4 static combat res, which is a big deal if you've ever played a Death Army. Counter charge. Now this bit rule is really good as well, and I love this. I think this adds a load of tactical complexity to the game with such a simple interaction. And basically this allows you to counter charge an enemy unit that is also cavalry, chariot, or monster, as long as they're further than their normal move away. And what's cool about this is that you get the benefits of charging. So your Bretonian Lance getting charged in the front, you dig your heels in, your horse is charged to meet them, you both count as charging. That's really cool, because that was one thing that always felt a little bit weird, that you got charged and you were like, well, why couldn't have we, you know, we didn't get the charge, so, but we're not going to stand there. You're not stood still, are you? So I really like that rule. I think that adds a lot. You can only do it to one of the charging units. There might be some weirdness with this interaction, because the way it's written, you declare all your charges, then they declare all the reactions, and then you resolve them. So I don't know if there's going to be some weirdness with it, because you can't count. You might end up pivoting and then exposing a flank. So one of the moves you could do, for example, is have 2 units in the front. One's a unit they can countercharge, but if they countercharge, because they pivot and face directly towards that unit, they might expose their flank to the other unit. So there's ways to get around this rule. So it'd be interesting to see how it pans out. You know, do you want to get your bonuses and then get flanked, or do you want to not get flanked? You know, so kind of cool. You got cumbersome, so you cannot stand and shoot as a charge reaction with cumbersome weapons. We saw that in the weapons video. Detachment. Now, detachments work pretty much like Empire detachments. One thing I will say, obviously, it's referencing another page. I don't have that to hand. Detachments, I will do a video on formations, and I'll do detachments in that video. But detachments are kind of like they always used to work. They're kind of little units that don't have command, that stay next to the parent unit, I think 3 inches. And if you charge the parent unit, you can stand and shoot, or you can counter charge. So it's basically exactly the same. And so you'll have a special rule, it's called regimental unit, I think, which allows you to take detachments. So I think in the skeleton cohorts in the Arcane Journal, in Cetra's Armor, they can take detachments. So, but it's generally for the Empire. So the Empire get detachments. There might be other units in there. I haven't looked through all the profiles. Dragged along, so a model with a special rule begins its move within 1 inch of a friendly unit whose troop of infantry is not fleeing and has 10 or more models, may replace its movement with the characteristic of that unit. So this might be things like the Screaming Bell, Plague Furnace type thing. Obviously, I know that Skaven are in these legacy rules, and people probably want to know my opinion on that, but that's for a different video. And I think that, you know, these rules, obviously they've said they're going to release PDFs, so it's probably for things like that. And later in the game, it might be used. Maybe you've got like war engines you can drag along, like the War Altar maybe is like not driven by horses. I don't know. Then you've got Drilled. So Drilled is a free redress the ranks maneuver immediately before moving. Now, the maneuver is a redress ranks, not a reform, but this does allow you to change your ranks from you know, march formation to combat formation, or, you know, and vice versa. I don't know if this allows you to do this before you charge, because it does say the unit moves immediately before moving. I don't think so. I think it's a remaining moves thing, but anyway, there's a thing there. Also, you don't need to take a march test or a leadership test to march if the enemy's of an 8. And if a character joins the unit, they gain the rule as well. It's not once per game, it's basically all the time. So adopt your march for column, move very fast. Next turn, reform back into combat order, do a little bit of a wheel, whatever you want to do. Ethereal, this is basically the same. You can move through terrain. You can't end inside impassable. You can move through it. And you can only be wounded by magical attacks. Characters cannot join ethereal units. So characters cannot join ethereal units unless they are themselves ethereal, and vice versa. Self-explanatory. Let me get into the E's and F's. So we've got evasive. Once per turn, when this unit is declared as a target of an enemy shooting phase, it may choose to fall back in good order. So that's a flee and then immediately rallies. Once it's done the move, the enemy unit continues its shooting as declared. So you still shoot the unit you declared on if you can. It doesn't mean you can change targets because they're now out of range. So I don't know how useful this will be, but this could be pretty good if you've got it on like a unit of shooters moving into range, shoot them, they go to shoot you, you flee out of their range, you immediately rally, you then move, and then you shoot them. I mean, there is a rule that allows you to move in the shooting phase. So if you have that as well, this could be pretty... You could have some pretty obnoxious units. Extra attacks is fairly self-explanatory. I don't think I need to explain that one. You get extra attacks. Fast cavalry. Now, fast cavalry is completely different than previous editions of Warhammer. In old editions of Warhammer, you would have a whole section about fast cavalry, and they'd have a bucket ton of rules. Now, this is just a universal special rule, or USR. And basically, if you are in an open order formation, you can do a quick turn. Now, you can do a quick turn if you're in open order anyway. The real difference is even if you march, which is when you cannot do it. Now, open orders can also benefit from marching column. So you could do a marching column, march, free triple speed, then do a quick turn if you're fast cavalry. So that could be really good. So fear is the whole thing about if you cause it, you don't suffer from it. If a character joins a unit that doesn't, then the unit doesn't get immunity, and that kind of stuff's all at the bottom. But essentially, if you want to charge a fear causer and they outnumber you, that's their unit strength is higher, then you must take a leadership test. If you fail it, you just don't charge. You go, nope, we don't fancy that. It does count as a failed charge, but you do not move. So you stand still and you decorate the insides of your fatigues. Then you have a second point here, which is if you engage with an enemy unit that both causes fear and has a higher unit strength, when it's chosen during the choose and fight combat sub-phase, you have to take a leadership test. If you fail it, then basically you're -1 to hit. And again, you only ever take one fear test per turn. So if you pass the test to charge in, then you're not taking a test in combat because you've already taken one. Then we have Feigned Flight. So Feigned Flight is if a unit chooses to flee or fire and flee as a charge action. It doesn't give you the fire and flee rule. It just means if you have this rule and you do a flee or a flee type action, you automatically rally. So you go, we're going to rally. That's fine. Very strong if you've got fire and flee and Feigned Flight, because you could shoot, run away, rally immediately and be like, yep. I bet those wood elves have got a lot of these rules. You got fighting an extra rank. It is a supporting attack as described on 145. So spears and whips and things have this. Now, some people have said about how does it work with step up. I saw I had a chat with someone in the comments, and they said about like, well, if you died and the one behind stepped up, can they still fight? I believe they can, because the model behind them still is behind a model in the fighting rank, which is the caveat. Which then begs the question: if you have a unit of like 30 guys, 5 wide, and you kill 10, could 5 still fight? So I don't know. It might get FAQ'd. Who knows? The way I would play it is just that those 10 eligible models that die can't fight, but otherwise they could fight. So if you've got 10 spearmen in like 5 in combat, 5 behind, and they kill 6, then 4 attack, rather than none. Then we've got fire and flee. The unit fires off basically and then runs away. So it does a stand and shoot, but before running, but due to the time shooting, when you flee roll, it rolls 2d6 and discards the lowest. So you roll a bit slower. And it does say that if the charge distance between this unit and is less than the movement of the charging unit, you can't do it. You just got to hold. Which is the same for stand and shoot. First charge, we've seen this rule on some Bretonians. If the first charge of the game is successful, i.e. if the unit makes contact with a charge target, the charge target becomes disrupted until the end of the combat phase. So that means you're going to lose your rank bonus, basically. It's quite a big deal. I think there might be a little bit of like having to screen and flee to make that charge not be successful. So, you know, they're not quite as healthy. Flaming attacks is kind of like a keyword which interacts with other special rules. Essentially, they do still have the same thing where they cause fear in war beasts and swarms. And basically, it just says they make flaming attacks. So there are some rules that interact with it. For example, flammable. A model with this special rule cannot make regen saves against a wound caused by a flaming attack. So there you go, flaming attack, can't take regen. So then we have Fly X. So Fly X, this is interesting. So you can move on the ground normally using your move, or you can fly. How many inches varies model to model and is shown in the brackets is by the X. You may move as normal, charge, march, etc., etc., except they can pass over models, units, and terrain without penalty, and they can even march whilst within 8 of an enemy without taking a leadership test. They may also end their movement in terrain, but will suffer the effects of the terrain if they do so, like dangerous tests, things like that. They cannot end their movement on top of impassable terrain, another unit, or within 1 of an enemy unit. Models that can fly must begin and end all of their movement on the ground. A character with a special rule cannot join a unit without the special rule, and vice versa. Which is quite important if you wanted to have a flying Hierophant with a Cloak of the Dunes. Maybe you don't want to. There might be a caveat on that special rule that lets you join a unit, but I can't off the top of my head right now. I'd have to go look, and I'm not going to stop the video to do that. But when I did a Team King show, I will look for these things. Frenzy. A Frenzy model +1 to its attacks. It doesn't apply to the mount. all the beasts, or the rider. In addition, if the majority of the models in a unit are frenzied, you automatically pass fear, panic, and terror. It's a bit like I've been playing a lot of Dark Tide, and this just reminds me of Ragers. If the unit includes one or more frenzied model is able to declare a charge during the declared charges step, it must. If the majority of the unit are frenzied, it cannot choose flee as a charge reaction, and nor can it ever choose to make a restraint test, so you have to pursue. Which is basically how it's worked for as long as I can remember. Losing Frenzy, unlike other special rules, Frenzy can be lost during a game. Any model that loses a round of combat will immediately lose this special rule. Again, pretty much how I remember it. Then we have Furious Charge. So during a turn it made a charge of 3 inches or more, you gain an +1 modifier to your attacks characteristic. So pretty good, pretty nasty. Hatred X, where X is your hated enemy of choice. So a model with a special rule may re-roll hit rolls against a hated enemy in the first round of combat. Re-rolls to hit are egregiously overpowered, always have been. Which enemies are hated varies from model to model, as shown in brackets after the name of this special rule, shown as X. Some models hate all enemies, means they hate all enemy models equally. I'm sure they've got a favourite. Horde. A unit with this special rule may increase its maximum rank bonus by 1. We talked about that. That's to allow things like goblins and skeletons and other mediocre rubbish troops, maybe Empire State troops, to get a rank bonus above the standard, like heavy infantry and things like that. So yeah, it's a cool rule. I'm glad it's there. I'm glad the sort of the 10 wide fight 3 deep thing's gone, or whether it was 2 deep and then 3 deep if you got spears. Yeah, that was all a bit silly, seeing like big lines of infantry. You might still see that as they can all fight, but only with 1 attack. Howdah. To represent a Howdah and the crew, a behemoth with this rule is split profile and follows both the split fire chariots and firing platform rules. In other respects, this model is a behemoth. So yeah, it just gives you some additional rules around the crew fighting and things like a chariot, but it's a monster it's a monstrous chariot essentially. What I quite like about this rule book, and maybe it's clear from here, and I've noticed this from trying to answer questions from the comments, is that it's a very easy to navigate rule book because they've put these references in the paragraphs where you need it. So it references a rule, it immediately gives you a page reference. So flicking back and forth and checking things out, and the index is very good as well, is easy. It doesn't take long at all. And they've even repeated rules in relevant sections where they are that important. An example I can think of is wizard armor. I think it's under the armor section, it's in the wizard section, and it's in the magic section. So it's in 3 different places. Same rule, but that's actually quite nice because as a user of the book, it's seamless to a point. This is quite the opposite experience I'm having with Legion Imperialis. Although I really like the game, the rule book layout is shockingly bad and doesn't have an index. So we really struggled the other night to get through our game, flicking backwards and forwards. And I know it's not a very complicated game. It's a lot simpler than Warhammer the Old World. So maybe it didn't need that effort, but yeah, it would be nice to see a standard that come into other games. I'm just going to say kudos to the Old World team, people behind the book, because it's a really good job. Ignore cover. If a model making a shooting attack has a special rule, it ignores hit rolls called by partial or full cover. Again, pretty self-explanatory. Immune to psychology. If the majority of the models are immune to psychology, they automatically pass fear, panic, and terror tests. However, if the majority of the models in a unit have the special rule, they cannot choose to flee as a charge reaction. And this does not make the unit immune to any test made against the leadership not stated here. So it doesn't make you immune to other leadership-based tests, just these ones. Is a good example of this rule is the Cambrian rule will include immune to psychology, unbreakable, unstable, and fear is all rolled up into one glorious rule. And that's why these universal special rules might be multi-referenced under another rule for your faction. Impact hits X. The number of impact hits caused varies model to model and will be shown in brackets after the name of the special rule. Often this is determined by the roll of a dice, like D3, D6, etc. The impact hits can only be made by a charging model that moves 3 inches or more and that is in base contact with the enemy. Impact hits are attacks made in combat that always strike first at initiative 10, regardless of modifiers, and that hit automatically using the unmodified strength of the model. Now, I think in the way that stuff dies before it can fight, impact hits are very strong. This, I think, allows Tomb Kings to be competitive with their low initiative and their restrictions around marching and fleeing and things like that, because their chariots are baller good when you're charging light toughness army that hits really hard, like high elves. So I would see that impact hits is a really good rule if you can get that off. So obviously you need to charge. Chariot runners might help you, and yeah, I think they're really good. Automatically hitting as well gets around weapon skill, gets around initiative. Yeah, so we're just worrying about toughness and armor basically. Impetuous, people have asked about this. This is basically a 1 to 3. You've got 2 to charge unless you roll a 4+. So if you're impetuous and able to declare a charge on a 1 to 3, you have to. On a 4+, you don't. So that's it. Killing blow. We mentioned this before. It's very similar to how it used to work. So if you roll a natural 6 when making a to wound roll for an attack in combat, you have done a killing blow. Enemy models whose troop type is infantry or cavalry are not permitted an armor or regeneration save against a killing blow. If the enemy models whose troop type is infantry or cavalry suffers an unsaved wound from killing blow, it loses all of its remaining wounds. It says, note, if an attack wounds automatically, it cannot be used. So if you don't roll the dice, you can't get a benefit of it. So, you roll a 6 to hit, you insta-gib, whatever. They get a ward save if they've got one, but other than that, they're dead. Large target. Enemy models never suffer to hit modifiers for full or partial cover when shooting at models with this special rule. And you can draw a line of sight to a model with this special rule over and through other models and vice versa. So see it and it can see you. Not dissimilar to what we've had before. Levies. This is one of the special rules that goes with like mercenaries, and basically it says that you cannot use inspiring presence of your army's general nor hold the ground rule of the battle standard. However, a little is expected from levies, and therefore they do not cause panic in your other units. Loner is basically a character with this special rule cannot be a general. And you cannot join a unit without the special rule. And a unit with a special rule cannot be joined by a character without the special rule. So I think Slayers are loners. So you can't have a Slayer general. And you couldn't join a Slayer unit with a normal dwarf. You need to have a loner rule. I think that all the Slayers are loners. Magic attacks, it's a bit like flaming attacks. We saw that Referral interacts with this, that if ethereal units are hit by magical, then they can be hurt. And it says any attack made or caused by a model by this special rule or a weapon with this special rule is a magical attacks. So it does say, note, all spells and magic items are considered to have this rule. So if you've got a magic sword or you've got a fireball, it's magical. Clue is in the name. Gonna cast a spell. Is it magical? Yes, it's magical. We get magic resistance. We touched on this when I did the magic show. I don't mean I pulled a rabbit out of a hat. I'll use that gag again. The casting roll of any enemy spell, including bound spells, that targets a unit that includes one or more models with this special rule, suffers a modifier as shown in brackets after the name of this special rule as -X. And please note, this is not cumulative. That means you've got magic resistance 1 and another model with magic resistance 2. That doesn't equal 3, that is 2. And we have the mercenary rule. Often, an army can include certain units drawn from another army list as mercenaries. They gain this special rule. Mercenaries cannot use the inspiring presence or of the army general or hold ground of your battle standard, they cannot be joined by characters drawn from another army list. I think levies might be a different thing. That might be just like certain troops. Can't remember. Anyway, mercenaries basically can't either. You've got monster handlers. A monster with special rule is accompanied by one or more models representing its handlers. During deployment, position the models anywhere adjacent to it in base contact with the monster. If the handlers are found to be blocking movement or line of sight, you just move them out of the way. So effectively the monster is what you care about, its position, its base. In combat, each handler adds its attacks to those of its monster. If a monster suffers an unsaved wound, roll a d6. On a 1 to 4, it loses a wound. On a 5 plus, a handler model takes the wound and is removed from play. If the monster is removed from play, so is handlers. So Monster Slayer is a special rule that means if you roll a natural 6 to make it a wound roll, you've got a monstrous slaying blow. You used to call it heroic killing blow. Any models whose troop type is monster are not permitted an armor or regen save against a monster slaying blow. If an enemy model whose troop type is monsters takes an unsaved wound from a monster slaying blow, it loses all of its wounds. And again, like scorpions have both this and killing blow, so that's quite cool. Then we have Motley Crew. Units with this special rule may include models of the same type that are equipped differently and or models of different types that fight together in a single unit. If necessary, the army list entry for such units will be accompanied by a brief explanation of the unit's composition. So if you've got different weapons, the fighting rank may contain models armed with different weapons. You basically roll different batches of dice to represent different models, making it clear which is which. Then they obviously go in initiative order as normal. You might even have different armor. In combat, you use the armor of the majority models in the fighting rank. In shooting, use the armor value of the majority models in the unit. When you take away casualties, you should divide equally as possible between the different models within the unit when you get shot at. In combat, casualties should be removed from among the majority of the models that make up the fighting rank. In either case, available models are brought forward from the rear ranks to fill gaps. Move and shoot, we saw this one already with javelins. A weapon with this, or maybe it was throwing spears, a weapon with this special rule can be used in the shooting phase even if the model marched. So march, you can still chuck it. Then we have move or shoot. A weapon with this special rule cannot be used in the shooting phase if the model equipped with it moved for any reason during the turn, including rallying and reforming. Move through cover. Models with this special rule do not suffer modifiers to their movement for moving through difficult or dangerous terrain. In addition, a model with a special rule may reroll any rolls of 1 when taking dangerous terrain tests. So you still take dangerous terrain, you just get a reroll. We saw multiple shots as well, and this basically allows you to roll more dice, but you have a -1 to your hit modifier. And then when the number of multiple shots are generated by a dice roll separately for each model. So if it was D3 shots and you had 5 models, you wouldn't roll 1 D3 and apply it to the whole unit. You would roll 5 D3 for your number of shots. Multiple wounds X. So if an unsaved wound by this special rule is multiplied by the number in brackets, where multiple wounds are generated by dice, roll separately for each unsaved wound. It does say to note that excess wounds cause a model to have no cause to a model will not have an additional effect unless the model is a character and that counts for overkill. They don't spill over, so it's a bit like 40k. So if they've got a 1 wound model and you do a 6 wound attack, you don't lose 6 guys. Just lose 1 guy. Really lose that guy. Open order, I've mentioned this in other things, is basically a halfway house between skirmisher and ranked, but gets basically all the benefits of being ranked up, no drawback, and some extra mobility. So open order is really good. Poison attacks, you roll a 6 to hit. The hit will automatically wound. This would bypass things like killing blow. Unless otherwise stated, a model with this special rule may use it when making both shooting and combat attacks. Any spells cast by the model unaffected, as are any attacks made with magic weapons. It does say as well that if you need a hit roll of 7 or it hits automatically, you don't use the rule. Got Ponderous. A weapon with a special rule suffers a hit modifier of -2 for moving and shooting rather than normal -1. So like handguns, for example. Quick Shot. A model with a special rule does not suffer the usual -1 modifier for moving and shooting. In addition, a unit equipped with weapons with this special rule can use them to make a stand and shoot charge reaction regardless of how close the charging unit is. So it's pretty good as you don't get any modifiers, and then you can always stand and shoot. A Rallying Cry. During the command sub phase of their turn, if they are not engaged in combat, this character may nominate a single fleeing friendly unit within their command range. The nominated unit immediately makes a rally test. If the test is failed, they may attempt to rally again as normal during the rally sub phase. It gives you 2 chances to rally something important. It's a pretty cool rule. Random attacks. It's kind of self-explanatory. Every time you roll to see how many attacks you get. Every time you're going to fight. Random movement, again, kind of self-explanatory. You don't have a normal movement characteristic. Instead, you roll a dice roll is given, like 2d6, for example. You roll the dice, see how far it moves. Now, when you move, and they move during the compulsory move subphase, they cannot march or declare a charge. They can wheel to change direction, but cannot perform any other maneuvers. If you reach an enemy unit, then you count as charging, and they can only hold. If every model and unit has this special rule, you roll once for the entire unit. If 2 or more models have different random move values, roll for each and use the lowest for the entire unit. Regeneration X+. So demons, trolls, undead can regenerate wounds. It's said it here. So a model with this rule makes a regen save. The value of the regen save is shown in brackets after the name of the special rule, shown here as X+. A regen save can never be modified by the AP of a weapon and can be made in addition to an armor save or ward save. However, any wounds saved by a regeneration save are still counted for the purpose of calculating combat result. That's something you have to keep track of. So if you did like 5 wounds and they saved them, they regen them, they still count. That's going to be particularly important to keep track of those wounds if you're playing against undead or anything that's unstable, basically. But you just make sure you make a note of the ones saved, they still count towards combat res, so it's quite important. Mention, and it does say flaming and magical can make them vulnerable. So they might have flammable, or they might have I think there's a warp spawned rule that makes you vulnerable to magic. So obviously it's like demons get a regen unless you've got magical. Undead get a regen unless you've got flaming, and they're flammable, probably. So regimental unit. A unit with this special rule can be accompanied by detachments. So that's just the rule that allows you to take detachments. Requires 2 hands. Can't use a shield alongside. It's kind of self-explanatory. Reserve move. Now this is another one of these movement special rules, the new one. Unless it's charged, marched, or fled during the movement phase, a unit with this special rule may make a reserve move at the end of the shooting phase of its turn. After all shots have been resolved, a unit making a reserve move moves as described in the basic movement rules. It may maneuver normally, but cannot march. Pretty cool, right? I mean, you get to then, if you haven't marched, you get to shoot and then move again. So that's going to be pretty good for stuff like skirmishes, move up, shoot, move backwards, things like that. Scouts. So you could deploy after all units of both armies. They can be deployed anywhere on the battlefield, 12 away from an enemy model. If deployed this way, scouts cannot declare a charge during the first turn. If both armies contain scouts, you roll off to determine who deploys their scouts first, then you alternate. I mean, I quite like the scout rule because it's about position. It's not about alpha striking. A lot of the stuff to do with coming on from the side and charging, or doing this and charging, it's all taken away because they say, well, you can't charge. So basically, it allows you to set up for a future turn. So it gives your opponent a little bit of time to react to it. I quite like that. Shield wall. Once per game during a turn in which it was charged, a unit that is arrayed in close order formation with this rule and is using shields may give ground rather than fall back in good order. So maybe you don't want to get pushed back. Skirmishers, you can be a skirmisher. There's a full set of rules for those. I'm not going to go into detail in this show. That'll be later. Stomp attacks. The number of stomp attacks caused varies from model to model, and we're shown here as an X. It sometimes is determined by a roll of a dice. Stomp attacks can only be made by attacking a model that is in base contact with the enemy. They are made in combat that always strike at initiative 1 and that hit automatically using the unmodified strength of the model. So effectively, they're like impact hits, but they go last and you don't need to charge. So yeah, there you go. Strike first, model with this gets initiative 10. And if you have both strike first and strike last, they cancel each other out. And that's where we get into strike last, which I think is the next rule. Yeah. So it says again, your initiative is 1 before any modifiers are applied. So if you have both the rules, they cancel out. Now, if your initiative 1, because you've got a great weapon, and you charge, you're still going to get the bonus initiative for charging. So any buffs to your initiative is still going to affect your initiative value. You're not just initiative 1. You are initiative 1 to start with. Then you get these benefits. So if you've got a low initiative anyway, great weapons are kind of fine because you don't care. You're like, well, I'm already initiative 1 or 2, so it doesn't matter. Stubborn. So this used to be pretty egregious. You get leadership 10 rerollable 3 dice stubborn units. But anyway, the first time a unit is required to take a break test, it may choose to just not do it and will automatically fall back in good order. And that's even if the unit strength of the winning side is more than twice that of the losing side. Because if it is normally, you would be a flea. A unit that is not stubborn does not become stubborn when joined by a character that is, and a stubborn character cannot use this rule whilst part of a unit that is not. So effectively, these sort of extra bits are just to stop people putting like a character in a unit and giving the unit a whole bonus for the character living there. But basically, stubborn is a great rule because you basically automatically, it does say the first time it's required to make a break test. So it doesn't say that you can use it in the second time you've got to take a break test or the third time. So the first time, you also don't roll the break test. You have to decide to use it before you roll. So if you roll and you go, oh, rubbish, I'm breaking, you can't then say, are you stubborn? No, it's too late. You've got to say, right, first time, I'm going to just fall back in good order. So you are getting pushed back. Now, I think if you had stubborn and shield wall, for example, you could then just get pushed back rather than fall back in good order because you could use, I think that's what we just said it did, didn't we? Yeah, may give ground rather than. Yeah, so if you've got shield wall and stubborn, you could basically say, right, I'm going to just give ground. I'm going to lose the Kachai lot. I'm going to give ground. I'm not going to take a test because I'm going to use shield wall and stubborn, and there we go. So basically, stupidity works pretty much the same. If you take a test and you fail it, then you move in the compulsory move subphase. You go straight ahead, you don't perform maneuvers, you can't march, you can't charge. If a unit or mount that doesn't have this rule becomes subject to it, when joined or ridden by a character that does, it's contagious being stupid, apparently. After working many years, I can say that's true. What I would say, a little bit of an important distinction from previous editions, it doesn't say you can't flee as a charge reaction. I think previously you weren't allowed to, and it also doesn't say that in combat you just stop fighting. I think half the models stopped fighting in previous editions, so that's gone. Obviously you might have other special rules that stop you fleeing, but stupidity doesn't. So Swift Stride, a unit with this special rule increases its max charge range by 3 inches, and when it makes a charge, flee, or pursuit roll, it may add a d6 to the result. Now this is a bit important that it's not part of the original roll. So because you're going to be rolling dice, picking the highest, you would roll this d6 afterwards, or a different coloured dice, because it's a d6 modifier to the result, not extra dice then you discard and whatever. So like if you like for example, something say roll 2d6, discard the highest or the lowest, you wouldn't add a d6 to that, then discard the highest or lowest. You would do that bit first, then add the d6. And what it means by maximum is normally you can't declare a charge unless they're within your movement +6. This would be your movement +9. Doesn't mean you add 3 inches to your charge. You're adding d6 modifier to your charge roll. So maybe you'll get a 6, maybe you'll get a 1. Who knows? 3 is kind of down the middle. That's probably why it's 3. Terror. Models with this special rule cause terror. They also cause fear, obviously. When a unit causes terror and it declares a charge, the target unit must immediately take a test. If it fails, it must flee. There's no unit strength on that. It's just terror causer comes at you, take your test. If the winning side of a combat includes one or more units that cause terror, each unit that belongs to the losing side must apply -1 to its leadership when taking the break test. So that's an extra -1. It does say that if a charge unit cannot choose to flee, it does not make this leadership test. And it says as well that models with the fear special rule, fear models that cause terror, and models that cause terror are immune to terror. A unit that does not cause terror does not become immune to terror when joined by a character that does. Timber. When a model is reduced to 0 wounds, the winner of a roll-off chooses one of its arc, front, flank, or rear for it to fall into. Any units that are within the chosen arc in base contact take d6 hit with a strength characteristic of the model with an AP of -1. I do remember in the day used to be the Fallen Giant template. I even remember there was a 3D one. I think they printed a clear plastic one that you could get of a giant fallen over. And then some people painted it, which kind of defeated the object of it being a clear template, but it was cool. Yeah, so no more Fallen Giant template. You just roll. Oh, the templates. We want them back. We want the templates back. Foot of Gork and everything. Then we've got Unbreakable. If a unit with this special rule loses a round of combat, it is not required to take a break test. Instead, it will automatically give ground as it is pushed back by the enemy. Characters that are not unbreakable cannot join units that are, and vice versa. So they do still get pushed back, which is quite an interesting thing to note. Unstable. If a unit with this special rule loses a round of combat, it loses 1 additional wound for every combat result point it lost by, basically. They are suffered after combat results have been calculated before break tests. If an unstable unit contains any unstable characters, allocate wounds to the unit until each model has been allocated 1 wound, then you go on to the characters divided evenly as possible. Then we have Vanguard. After deployment, units with this special will make a Vanguard move. A unit making a Vanguard move moves as described in the basic movement rules, cannot march, and if you both have them, you roll off. So Vanguard's quite useful. I quite like the Vanguard rule because it does mean that you can charge in the first turn. It doesn't say you can't, so it does increase your threat if you've got a offensive unit that can Vanguard. It says Veteran. If the majority of the models in the unit have the special rule, you may re-roll any failed leadership tests. It does say note a break test is not a leadership test. That's like, we're talking panic, fear, terror, that kind of thing. Volley fire. So when a unit with a special rule makes a shooting attack, half of the models in each rank other than the front rank, or front 2 ranks on the hill, can shoot in addition to the usual models that shoot from a front rank or front 2 ranks of units on the hill. A unit cannot volley fire if it is moved for any reason during the turn, including reforming, or when making a stand and shoot charge reaction. Unless you're the cohorts in the Tomb King army, they can. Note that models, because they've got a special rule, note that models in the rear ranks use the line of sight of the model in the front of the file. So the front model, their line of sight. So effectively, you're like adding, and for every 2 behind, you're adding 1 shot, if you want to think of it that way. Then you have Warband. Unless it's fleeing, a Warband gains positive plus modifier to its leadership, equal to its current rank bonus, up to a maximum of leadership 10. However, a Warband cannot use this modifier to its leadership should it ever choose to make a restraint test. In addition, if the majority of the models in this have this special rule, it may re-roll its charge roll. It's quite a good rule. It allows you to get bonuses to leadership, but also like the re-roll charges is pretty strong. I haven't really seen much else that allows you to do that. Warp Spawned, a model with a special rule cannot make regeneration save against a model caused a wound caused by magical attacks. And again, it's like Referral, you can't join, vice versa. This is like your demons, basically. So demons don't like magical attacks, undead don't like flaming attacks, which I quite like what they've done there, and that's cool. And that's all the special rules. We've got it, all of them. And there we go, there's a cheeky little beastman with his warband rule, getting his rerolls, he loves it. So that's every universal special rule in the core book of Warhammer the Old World. So there's quite a lot. They're going to become second nature after a few games. You're going to learn them very quickly. And then when you play against armies or factions, or you read up on factions, just understanding what they mean is going to make a world of difference to whether you buy that upgrade or not, or how it's going to work, or how different special rules interact. So sometimes you'll have 3 or 4 special rules and they interact together to combine to the play of that unit. So Undead is a prime example. You'd have your regen save, you can have your flammable, you're going to be unstable, you're going to be immune to psychology, you're going to cause fear, and the one I forget. But and you'd be unstable, so you take wounds from combat res. So basically, all those rules together combined give you the flavour of how the undead work. As a prime example, you know, it's so I think it's quite an elegant way, and like I think there's some extra cool ones around the shooting phase, movement, chariot runners, and things like that, which I think are really strong. Anything that allows you to move more, or move through, or move out of sequence, they're all really good. Like if you can get those rules, they're brilliant. There are a couple rules that have no benefit. You know, being flammable isn't a good thing. You know, being stupid isn't a good thing. Don't we know it? And, you know, other rules that just are not beneficial. So they're more like penalties. And usually with the penalty comes a benefit of whatever it might be. So the reason you might have this rule is because of this. So for example, like undead, they're unstable, but then they don't break. So there's like, it's like they're unbreakable, which is great, but then they've got this other rule. So it's like, oh, it's not quite the same. So sometimes it's important to understand what all the negative rules do as well as the positive rules. And obviously we looked at the magic and how they can apply different modifiers and instances to the game, like, you know, putting down that crystal column, but then if you're Referral, you can move through it anyway, or, you know, you'll be able to fly over it. So there's ways to avoid being blocked in if you can fly and stuff like that. And it's important to note how characters with special rules interact with units with special rules. I think someone asked me, could a Bretonnian on a Pegasus join a unit of Pegasus? I can't see any reason why you can't, looking at the rules, because you've got the same unit type, you've got the fly special rule. There's nothing in the rules I can see that stops a character joining that unit. So as far as I know, you can. I'm going to look through the characters in a bit more detail, and I'm going to do a character show. It's all to be about characters and units and how they work. I might try and do that with some models to do some more visual rather than text, because I think when we're getting into stuff with physical models and ranks and line of sight and charging, they're like practical things I can demonstrate on a table a bit better than just showing text. And then you can refer to the text, hopefully when you've got your rule book in a week's time. And, you know, everyone's been able to get hold of that book. I mean, they did say they're going to have EPUB versions, so I'm assuming that those digital versions won't be delayed or out of stock because they're digital. So hopefully everyone who wants to play can get hold of the rules. And on that note, I hope you find these series useful. And I know this information could come across a bit dry because I'm just telling you what the rules are, but hopefully I'm adding enough insight to keep it interesting. And let me know below if there's anything you particularly want to know about, and I'll go and find out the answer and come back to you. If I don't come back to you straight away, it might be because I'm busy, or I just need to go and check a few things and I haven't got the time to do it right then. I had a busy week at work this week, unfortunately, so I didn't get much done in the week. But hopefully next week I should be able to get more videos out. I'm hoping to do the how to play series, which is going to be more the basic foundation stuff, which will then refer to stuff in these videos, and that'll be done with physical models once I've dusted them off. I've found my chaos, I found my high elves, I can't find my tomb kings. I'm a little bit bummed out. I know I've got chariots, I've got bone giant, I've got Ushabti, I've got tomb swarms, I've got casket of souls. It's all metal, can't find any of it. I'm a little bit gutted. Hopefully it will turn up. I need to go up in the loft and scurry around for a bit and try and find these things. So hopefully, fingers crossed, they're up there. I also can't find my dwarf army, which is another thing that I'm a bit gutted about, but hopefully I'll find those. I did find some little gems up there, but I might do a video on my first ever Warhammer army because I found my original undead army on goblin green bases. If people are interested in that kind of thing, it's a little bit more fun and a little less rules or competitive play orientated. Anyway, that's enough of me rambling. I hope you enjoyed the show. Again, thank you very much for the support. If you want to support me and you want to get a cool Arcosite, QR codes come up shortly. Also subscribe, tell your friends. Again, thank you so much everyone who's commented, shared or discussed these videos with their friends, and I hope to see more of you on the channel in the future. And yeah, it's just great. It's a great response, and I'm super keen to finally get some models on the table and start playing the game once it's available for all. And there will be tournaments in the future. If anyone knows a good tournament resource for the UK, I'm talking about, of where events are listed, please let me know. I will be more than happy to share events. If you're running an event, let me know. I'll be more than happy to plug old world events and where they're being ran to try and get the community going, because I think it's been many years since 8th edition for me. I know Ninth Age continued. I'm not trying to take anything away from those guys. In fact, the guys doing Ninth is probably a big part of why old world is back. So thank you very much to all the people involved. Some people I know, some people I don't. I've had messages from people that I haven't spoken to or seen for many years. Super appreciate it. I'm really looking forward to reconnecting with everyone and getting back into the scene. And yeah, so please help me to help everyone watching this. Where to go to get to events? If there is any centralized resource, let me know. If there isn't, maybe we should look at setting something up. Thanks, guys. Thank you very much. And I'll catch you all on the next one. Take it easy. Have a good weekend.